Good morning, geeks and geekettes. I'm here to improve your geek knowledge, your nerdy repertoire of stories and deep inside baseball facts and lore of the comics industry that you can go down to your local comic shop this Saturday and blow their minds with the stuff that you'll learn here, and it'll be our little secret where you heard it. This is Ask Chuck Dixon 103, where I answer your questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living, as always and as ever, is I write comic books. First question, Chad Olson. I am a writer as well as a fan of yours. In other words, potential competition. I shouldn't discourage this. Or I shouldn't encourage this, I should say. Freudian slip. Anyway, back to your question, Chad. And one of your best pieces of advice that has helped me in particular was during a video where you talked about how important it is to quickly establish why an audience should care about characters. You used an example from the series Monk, where two Hispanic young men are trying to deliver a paper and end up getting killed. Actually, only one of them got killed. But anyway, what I love is how you and the Monk Show always do it right from the start. Is considering how important the caring element is also a part of your rewriting process? Do you go back and intentionally elevate how much an audience will care about a character? And if so, do you have an example of where you did it or even missed an opportunity to do it? No, it's not something I do in the rewrite process. I mean, I can't proceed with writing a story until I've made certain or done everything I could to make you care and have interest and sympathize and relate with the main character, and then consequently all the ancillary characters. As I've described in other episodes, a soap opera writer once told me, and soap opera writers, it's all story. They have my respect. She said that she was amazed at how quickly I could establish a character and make her care about it, both in comics and in prose. And I said, well, it comes from my innate fear of boring the reader. It's not necessarily that I have some, mutant ability. It's just I'm terrified of like losing you as a reader, and you just don't give a damn what happens next. So I can't proceed until I know that you care about and can relate to the character. So it can't be done in rewriting as far as I'm concerned, because if I failed to do that as I brought the character to life in my mind, I just wouldn't be able to go on from there. And a lot, every writer writes differently. Writers talk about their process, and I don't even know if process is it's too exact a term. It's just the way that I write, that the characters have to come to life in my mind. And a lot of times they come to life in my mind long before I put a word down on paper. So they're sort of living in my head, and I kind of know everything about. I don't know everything about them, but I learn as I write it. What they're capable of, what they'll do, how they'll react to given circumstances, and I feel that makes for a three-dimensional character as well as one you can relate to. As far as characterization and getting you to care about characters, I mean, there's different ways to do it. There's very purposeful, clear motivations. The movie Kill Bill comes to mind. Uma Thurman's motivations are in the title. She wants to kill Bill. And we learn early on in the film why, and the depredation she's been put through. And there's a lot of people who are going to have to pay for what happened to her, in this story. And it's very clear what she's about. And you are on her side from the beginning because she's so put upon. She's an underdog. She's literally left for dead. And, this is her road back to redemption in glorious grindhouse style. So, her motivations are clear. Now, there are other characters. We begin the story and their motivations aren't clear. We learn to care about them because we can relate to them for one reason or another. The movie Stripes comes to mind, where Bill Murray is pretty much a directionless loser, a total slob hero. He's a cab driver, hates his job, isn't particularly responsible cab driver. And, that's all you really know about this guy. But everybody's had a job they hated, so you begin to relate to this guy. And his girlfriend dumps him. Everybody can relate to that on some level. And directionless, he joins the army, where he actually finds a place. And the great thing about this movie is that he grows as a character, but not in any kind of sentimental way, not any kind of schmaltzy way. He grows as a character out of necessity and sort of rises to the occasion. And you get the clear impression that Bill Murray's character won't necessarily keep up this level of performance. And we can all relate to that as well. So here his motivations are unclear. He literally has no motivations other than, making life easier for himself and giving himself a bit of direction. The other way to build characters is through relationship. Frodo definitely grows as a character once Sam is introduced. And the two bounce off each other. Their relationship with each other is the key to what makes them relatable. And everybody wishes they had a friend as loyal as Sam. We all hope that we have a friend as loyal as Sam. And but it's one of those fictional bromances that they're hard to do. They're hard to achieve and make indelible. I think of Holmes and Watson, or Modesty Blaise and Willie Garvin. Two characters wedded together with a single purpose in mind. And that's a way to grow character and make them relatable. Now, speaking of characters and interrelations, as I've said before, if you're writing a romance in which you want the romance to seem believable and engaging, you have to make sure the audience falls in love with both characters, because they've got to earn the romance. They can't just meet and fall in love with absolutely no reason. And then there has to be complications, and there have to be roadblocks and obstacles they overcome, because they just have to be together. So if you're going to write a romance, a romantic comedy, a romantic drama, or whatever else, it is absolutely necessary that you engage the reader with both characters. You can't just, I see a lot of romance angles and stories that don't work because we love the one character and don't know anything about the other. The other is simply a cipher. They're a placeholder for some sort of paragon of romantic attention. But there's nothing earned there. They didn't earn this relationship they have that you presumably will last forever because they're so much in love. So, even if you have, the only example I can think of that flies in the face of this, and it's the one that always flies in the face of the romance angle, is The Postman Always Rings Twice, where we loathe both of these characters, but we understand as the story goes on that they deserve each other. That the worst fate you can imagine for these two murderers is that they have to be wedded to each other, body and soul, for the rest of their existence. Or at least until they're both placed in the gas chamber. Not to spoil anything for you. But so it's important, if you're going to move a story forward, that you first establish. And you can do it quickly. You can do it in just a few lines. I don't want to go over the monk example again. You can go back and look at the various videos in which I've referenced it. But you can shorthand everything. The other establishment element for a character, the other way to establish a character, is to kind of leave them an enigma and do the cold opening. In your introductory scene, let us know something about them that makes them engaging, mysterious, or whatever. In Casablanca, Humphrey Bogart is established early in the film as a tough guy, and a guy who's a bit cynical, maybe a little bit burnt out, and still has a sense of humor. Bitter, dry sense of humor. And so we already like the guy. And then when Ingrid Bergman shows up, it just gets all the more engaging, because now we find out more about his past and how a guy like this ended up in a place like this. And so he grows as a character, but the writers of the movie made absolutely certain that we found him entirely engaging before the real events of the movie begin. So, you can begin your story with your inciting incidents, or just begin the story with character. The simplest, most cut and dry, or the James Bond pre-credit sequence, in which we find out that, if you've never seen a James Bond movie before, we find out that he's tough, capable, resourceful, and given to corny takeaway lines. That's just the simplest way to establish it. And then the story begins after the credits are over. So there you go. There's a little bit more on character for you. Okay. Harold Pridemore. DC has some great names for cities. How did you come up with Bloodhaven? Well, the simple answer is I didn't come up with the name Bloodhaven. My original name for this town south of Gotham, this woebegone, city, was Drescher, which the fine folks at DC thought sounded not comic book enough, which they're right. And it was Scott Peterson, my very talented editor, who came up with the name of Bloodhaven and insisted on the umlauts in the name. And Scott would delight in pronouncing the name Bloodhaven, which he would do in this faux Swedish accent. So it was never, oh yeah, and then Nightwing goes to Bloodhaven. It was, and then Nightwing goes to Bloodhaven. and he never missed an opportunity to pronounce it that way. And but the rest was left up to me. The sort of hard luck town. The only time I wrote a biography of a town for comics, I wrote like a 2 or 3 page essay describing what Bloodhaven was all about and why it looked the way it looked and the attitude of the people and everything else. And growing up in Philadelphia, I knew what it was like to live in a city with a chip on its shoulder. And for those who've asked before, Bloodhaven is partly based on Camden, New Jersey, partly based on Trenton, New Jersey, and partly based on Manayunk, which is a section of Philadelphia. And Manayunk is not miserable and desperate the way Trenton and Camden are, but the layout of the town. Manayunk is a nice little community. It's a very cool place. But the layout of it, where there are highway overpasses and canals and railroad tracks and everything else going through town or over town or under the town, I like the idea of a town as a sort of a byway to other places. And Manayunk is definitely, it sits between Philadelphia and the far northern suburbs. And a lot of people drive through or past Manayunk, but a lot of people don't get off. And I think the people in Manayunk are just as happy to have it that way. All right, enough about Bloodhaven. Andrew Schweitzer. Hey, Mr. Dixon, sorry if this is a dumb question. There are no dumb questions. I'm sure your mother told you that. But I'm curious as to how Robin, Tim Drake, ended up getting a solo series a few years before Nightwing even did. Given Nightwing's popularity today, appearing in live-action series, cartoons, and animated movies, you'd think that giving him a solo series before this third Robin, who'd only been around for a short amount of time, would have made the most sense. Do you know why this is? Yes, I do know why this is, and it all comes down to the peculiar brand of office politics that went on at DC at the time and probably still goes on to this day. DC is a mysterious company, lots of secrets. It's also an oddball company because I don't know how many of you know this, but DC Comics became the banner for what were actually 3 different comic book companies. There was National Periodicals. There was I can't remember the names of the other 2 companies, but the comic books published by what would become DC Comics were actually the product of 3 different comic book companies working side by side. And things like the Justice Society were published by one, and Batman and Superman were published by another, and Blackhawk not Blackhawk, but other characters, Spectre, things like that. So these 3 companies were merged into one. They were merged into DC Comics in the 1950s. And that sort of weird bifurcation or trifurcation kind of deal, a sort of slapdash way of putting a company together, that feeling sort of persisted throughout the history of DC Comics. And even though Nightwing was extraordinarily popular after his Teen Titans run, he was never given a monthly title. And it was long known that he was the most popular character at DC who didn't have his own title. But the problem is that sometime in the late 70s, Nightwing was given over to the portion of the company that, basically the Teen Titans inhabited. And through some sort of sweetheart deal or whatever, and they signed a lot of these deals back then, and they were all secret and clandestine, cloaked in mystery. For whatever reason, Dick Grayson was no longer part of the Batman universe. He's part of the DC universe, not part of the Batman universe. This is one of the reasons why they had to replace Robin with Jason Todd. Dick Grayson would never be available to them again, in theory. He had joined the Teen Titans, and he was part of a separate franchise. And this went on for quite a long time, and it was still going on when I was writing Robin. Now, I write the first Robin miniseries. It's a hit. I write the second Robin miniseries. It's a phenomenal hit. And the third one did pretty good, too. We only did the third one, as I've said in prior videos, because I didn't think the character was ready for a monthly. I had not had a chance to build an ancillary cast, a supporting cast, a background story, what his day-to-day life was, all these. And so the third miniseries provided that. It showed him at school. It introduced all the background characters and set us up for the monthly. But the reason why Robin got a series, Tim Drake Robin, who was popular, certainly popular, but not as popular as Nightwing, the reason why he got one ahead of time is because of the success of the 3 miniseries. And, he was hot as a character. The reason why Nightwing did not get a series is because he was still part of the Teen Titans franchise. And there was work in the background between Denny O'Neil and Paul Levitz and whoever was running the Teen Titans end of things. There was work in the background to bring Dick Grayson home, to bring Nightwing back into the Batman family. And, it didn't make any sense to give him a solo book while he was leader of the Teen Titans. Because it would always seem like it wouldn't have made for a good monthly, because it just would have been another Teen Titans book. And at the time, Nightwing was hot. So he is officially, unofficially, maybe there was some sort of weird ritual in the basement of the Warner building. I don't know, but we were informed Dick Grayson is coming back into the fold. And we knew beforehand that this was all going on. These negotiations, whatever form they took, were going on. And so now Dick Grayson was ours to write about once again. And there were a couple of specials and this and that and the other thing. And then it was decided that Nightwing was ready for a monthly, which, as I've related before, again, Denny O'Neil and Alan Grant were to co-write with Scott McDaniel on art. And for reasons I was never told, yet another secret of the DC universe, both Denny and Alan backed out of the project, and I was asked to take it on, which I did, because I like Scott McDaniel's stuff, and I wanted an opportunity to work with him. And obviously I grew up with Dick Grayson as a character in my life, and I thought it'd be fun. And the invention of a new city, which was a big attraction. So, next question. Levi Sweeney. What kind of nonfiction do you read, and how often do you read it? Well, it seems like I'm reading nonfiction constantly, either on the web or in a book, to keep up with things, to research. And it's very rare that I'll read an entire book beginning to end. I'll cherry pick. But recently, in the last month or so, I've had a chance to read 3 excellent nonfiction books back to back. The first one is called Where Is My Flying Car? And it's written by a physicist and engineer. And it's about why don't we have the future we were promised? Now everybody says this, and it's kind of a joke, with the Jetsons and everything else. I mean, shouldn't we have flying cars by now? And this guy explains why we don't. That we very well should have had them. In fact, we were on track in the 1930s to eventually have privately owned vertical takeoff and landing flying cars. Technology was already in existence in the 30s and has only improved over time. and he talks about safety standards and everything else. The book is brilliantly written because he deals with all manner of scientific and technological advancement, but he always returns to the theme of the flying car, and it's like his layup motif. It's his prime example of why we are where we are. The book is both infuriating and inspiring at the same time, because the main reason that we don't have a flying car, we don't have cheap energy, we don't have a lot of the things that we have. We haven't landed on Mars. We don't have a moon base. The reason why we don't have a lot of the things that we have is corruption. He gives the example that the Wright brothers flew their first plane in 1903 at Kitty Hawk. Everybody knows this. And in 1910, they went to the Smithsonian and said that they wanted to donate their plane, the first, heavier than aircraft ever to fly. They wanted to donate it to the Smithsonian Institute. This is hard to believe, but the Smithsonian Institute refused it because they said, you weren't the first people to achieve heavier than air flight. It was this other guy. And the other guy just happened to be the director of the Smithsonian Institute, who had indeed invented a heavier than aircraft, but it was never able to get it off the ground. He eventually sold his patents to Curtiss, which would become an aviation pioneer, and they were able to get it off the ground, but years after the Wright brothers' successful flight. And that's just one example of the level, just the bold level of corruption that has stopped us from getting things like nanotechnology, stopped the cure of cancer, things like that. And this book just lays it out. Now, I'm no science guy. All my friends in high school were way smarter than me in science and math. And there's a lot of this stuff that I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't get, no matter how many times I reread it. But a lot of it I did. A lot of it I did understand. And it's just sad. And as he points out quite poignantly, everything went toward communications. Everything went toward digitizing everything. And while we can say that, yes, we have made incredible advancements, for a lot of you, within your lifetime, you've seen amazing advancements. They really haven't done all that much to improve our daily lives. And his example is that we basically traded the flying car for 140 characters. And I think that hits it in a nutshell. But to his mind, we should be at a level with particularly the creation of energy, where you get a monthly bill like you do from the cable company. Like your electric and gas bill would be $50 a month. It's always going to be $50 a month, and that's just to maintain the equipment, because the generation of the energy should cost almost nothing. And he goes into things like hydrogen ammonia cell generation. He goes into thorium nuclear reactors. Thorium has a 30-day half-life. It can be dissolved into water and made harmless, and generates power with near the efficiency of the far more dangerous plutonium. He talks about beta batteries. These are batteries powered by beta radiation. Beta radiation is so weak it can't make its way through a piece of typing paper. And you could have a battery that literally would outlast anything you put it in. Imagine having a battery for your cell phone that was good for the next 50 years. Imagine a Tesla with a driving range of 5,000 miles instead of the 300 miles that it is now. And all of these technologies were halted by interested parties or people that were short-sighted. Sorry to go on and on about this book, but it is absolutely fascinating. And if you write anything about technology, you write science fiction or anything else, you got to read this book, because this guy's ideas are just amazing, just jaw-droppingly amazing. In one section, he describes how there actually isn't enough carbon in the atmosphere, and he explains why. Some of the stuff he says I don't agree with, but one reassuring thing he says is that artificial intelligence is probably the one technology that we will not see perfected in our lifetimes. because it is such a complex question to answer. And he agrees with me that that's probably for the best, that artificial intelligence is just beyond our reach. Another one I read, couldn't be more different, The Trail Drivers of Texas by J. Marvin Hunter. Now, J. Marvin Hunter didn't write this book as much as collect it. And what it is, this guy went on an exhaustive search for any and all first-person descriptions of what it was like to be a drover in Texas back in the days of the cattle drives. And some of the entries are a paragraph or two, some are 3 or 4 pages. And it's a marvelous book if you're just interested in history, especially marvelous if you write Westerns, which I was writing a Western, or I am in the process of writing a Western that involves driving cattle, things like that. And I wanted to get my language right. And the language in this book is amazing. The stories are fantastic. Some of them are really, really grim. But the highlight here is the language. You're hearing these things as dictated by the men and women who lived this story. And it's some incredible stuff. I gave it to Bo Smith for Christmas. And he just said he just stayed up all night on Christmas reading this. Another one, it was recommended by one of you folks. It was recommended right here on Ask Chuck Dixon. Somebody emailed me and said, I need to get this book, 400 Things Cops Know. And it's basically a veteran patrolman sharing his knowledge with you, the same way I share my knowledge about the dangerous world of comic book writing. But this guy was a cop on the beat, ran into just about every situation you can imagine, and of course met lots and lots of other cops, and they all had stories. And he gives you the benefit of his knowledge. And it's really well written. A lot of it's got that dark cop humor. But it's a really cool book. And this guy, not just about police current day, but even, this guy's obviously very conversant with the history of law enforcement. He had a Wyatt Earp quote that I love early in the book, and I'm gonna save it. If you're interested in crime, true crime, if you're interested in writing crime or writing about cops, I suggest you get this book. Actually, if you're interested in any kind of like action story, this guy, he's got the goods. He'll tell you, what the real deal is. This is the best book on cops I've read since I bought an enormous manual about shooting incidents. And it was basically page after page after page of cops after action reports talking about what happened during the shootout. And that informed me more than anything else what, exchanging fire with criminals is really like. 400 things cops know that you will find fascinating. Samwise, whoa! Samwise is here. My good friend. Well, Frodo's good friend. In a previous episode, you talked about how you didn't enjoy working on the Batman Officer Down crossover and didn't like how it turned out. I see that you collaborated with much the same people, the usual suspects. Again, a year later on Bruce Wayne Murderer Fugitive crossover. What was the experience like this time around, and would you recommend reading it or not? No spoilers, except Stephanie. I see what you did there. Bruce Wayne Murderer, it was my last real foray, my last summit, my last few months on any kind of Batman related title. And it was a sad experience because I go into this in some detail in a video on Unauthorized TV if you're a subscriber there. But basically, editorial didn't run this crossover at all. They allowed one of the writers to run it. Not a good idea. Basically to say the teacher's pet will now be teaching class. And the writer in charge of it was supposedly a mystery writer. But as we went further and further into plotting this thing, well, he plotted it, his reputation came into doubt because it was a pretty lame mystery. And the most frustrating thing about it is when we got to day 3 of the summit, this is 3 days in a conference room hashing this thing out, and me growing more and more frustrated because there's very few details being done, being laid in place. At the end of the 3rd day, we adjourn without knowing who the murderer was. And I was like, whoa, we can't leave. we have to stay after class and figure this out. This isn't, what do we write? You can't write a murder mystery if you don't know the solution. You don't know what to write to. We didn't know anything about any of the suspects. And it turned out by the end of it, there were no other suspects. It was a Scooby-Doo story. There was only one suspect, the one character we've never met before. He has to be the murderer. And lo and behold, he is. And we discover he's the murderer by the end, not through Batman's amazing detective skills, but the murderer just simply confesses. It's like the end of a Perry Mason episode. He's the surprise witness. Just beginning to end bad stuff. And I'm like, you wrote whodunits? You come to us with this reputation as a great mystery writer, and this mystery was one of the worst I'd ever seen. It was horribly constructed. The other thing about it was in previous crossovers, everybody was given some meat, some dramatic high point to put into their issues. I mean, everybody got to share. Everybody got a good line. It's like an ensemble cast where everybody gets their scene, or an opera where everybody gets an aria. You get a chance to shine in this one moment. And this was bereft of them, unless you were the lead writer. And he got all the good scenes. Everybody else got the Dr. Explaino stories, which were all exposition and dry, poking in corners and taking fingerprint samples. And, it was just, Have I expressed my dislike for working on this? This is only one of the reasons I ended up at CrossGen and left DC. Just incredible frustration working with indifferent editors who just didn't seem to care that this story was a limp noodle from beginning to end. Okay, happier times. Andrew Venables. Man, I love Bane Conquest. Well, thank you. It's so much fun having the villains be so petty and childish. Yeah, Bane can be a bit of a prickly pear, can he? Not turning your phone off during an evil meeting is very poor form indeed. The gag with the blonde of the sports car is priceless. One of my favorite trades that I own. Well, thank you. I thank you, and Graham Nolan thanks you. Very few people got to read this because DC did little or nothing to promote it. If it didn't involve a lot of legal ramifications, I would describe how this series became about because it's fascinating. But it's going to have to be a giant rat of Sumatra story for the time being because I just don't feel... I didn't sign an NDA or anything, but I just don't feel right telling how Bane Conquest came to be. All I can say is that Graham and I were happy as pigs in slop to be working on this because it got to continue what we saw as our long saga of Bane. We got to take him in the direction we always wanted to take him in. In fact, we'd like to keep on doing it, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, if you had laugh out loud scenes, well, that Graham and I love putting the humor in. Not comedy. Comedy's different, but humor, things that grow out of character and events and everything else, and they're organically part of the story. And it was a hell of a lot of fun to work on and explore Bane's personality a bit more. Plus, it's a heck of an action story. It's a heck of a crime story, I think, and that's what we always wanted to do with Bane. Turn him into one of the major kingpins, central figures, capo de tutti capos of not only the Gotham underworld but the underworld, the criminal community of the DC universe at large. And I think we accomplished that, but unfortunately there won't be any follow-ups because I think the continuity for this story was left behind about 18 reboots ago. So anyway, maybe eventually there will be a Graham Nolan, Chuck Dixon Earth in the DCU multiverse that we can occupy and tell stories in, but I would not hold your breath. Joshua Little, I was wondering what your approach was to writing Conan as an evolving character. The character from Robert E. Howard was often surprised and taken aback by sorcery, but didn't really seem to learn so much. I often remembered him being further disillusioned from the hypocrisy of civilized people in the end. I haven't been able to find your Conan books yet, but I'd love to read them. What were your goals for the character as you wrote him? Well, I disagree about Conan's evolution as a character. The great thing about Conan is that he did not evolve. And if you're looking for my stuff, here's some covers. A 5-year run, on and off again run, but mostly I was the main writer on Conan for 5 years on Savage Sword. And the thing about Conan that I love and why he endures as a character is he's a primal character. He's the ultimate male wish fulfillment character. He is responsible to no one. He suffers no guilt. He goes through life living in the now, doing as he pleases, when he pleases, with whom he pleases, and he's a badass. So, and he's not. He's primal, and he's a barbarian, and he can be a bit of a handle, but he's also smart, or sly, or cunning, some version of that. And that's the way Howard saw him. I mean, Conan was a throwback character. When you think about it, Conan is the very first character of his type. In any novel or story before Conan's arrival, Conan would have been the villain in the story. There would have been another hero who eventually kills Conan by the end of the story, because he's a barbaric character with nothing to recommend him. But Howard flips the script and makes basically the bad guy the hero. And we love and admire Conan because he's so damn tough and resourceful and driven. And as I said, the ultimate male wish fulfillment figure, which is why in today's woke culture he's in such danger. We've seen recent examples of how they're trying to, tame Conan, who is untamable, in my opinion. But the thing is that this is now you're going to say, oh yeah, but what about Last of the Mohicans? What about Tarzan? Well, Tarzan and Last of the Mohicans, the characters, Chingachgook and characters like that, they were all part of that idea of the noble savage, which, let's face it, at its heart is a racist idea that, there's these people and, they run around with hardly any clothes on, and we would consider them stupid and ignorant, but there's some je ne sais quoi about them that makes them admirable. They use every part of the buffalo. This falls in line with the modern belief, the view of American Indians as some sort of pragmatic environmentalists. These are the same people that hunted many, many species of animals to extinction. Nothing against the Indians. I'm an American, so I've got some Cherokee in me. Nothing against them, but this is the history. So in order to make characters like Tarzan, who literally is an English lord and takes on the title, becomes a civilized, sophisticated guy when he's not in his loincloth, and unlike characters that Fenimore Cooper wrote about and others wrote about, Conan is not a noble savage. He is ignoble. There's nothing noble about him. He just wants wine, women, and song, and enough gold and jewels and gems to afford it all, and doesn't care who he has to kill to get it. He's irredeemable, and that makes him a fresh, appealing character, an enduring character, because he's the first of his type. Now, you may come up with some literary precursor to Conan, but I simply can't think of one that wasn't tinged with he has a spark of nobility in him. He has a spark of civilization. Conan despises civilization. He lives outside of civilization. He's off the grid in an age where everything was off the grid. There was no grid. But he's off he's just, you put him down anywhere and he's going to triumph because he's out of the box. He's off the hook. And that's what we love about the guy. And that's the way I wrote him. He did not evolve. He refused to evolve. And the thing about Conan and writing stories about Conan is that you could introduce him in 2 or 3 pages to a reader who'd never read a Conan story. And in the first 2 or 3 pages, they know everything they need to know about the character to continue on and be able to relate and understand what he's about. You just open up with a fight in an inn, or him struggling through the snow being chased by a monster, whatever. But those first 3 pages, like the James Bond pre-credit sequence I referenced earlier, he's perfectly set up. Primal character. That's why we love him. This will be another Conan question, Jerry. Jerry Bingham, if you don't know, legendary Batman artist. Did Son of the Demon, a number of other things. He's now a amazing painter, mostly Western themes. Look him up. This guy's super talented. You are super talented, Jerry, as I've often told you. He's also an author. I think he's got some books coming out soon. Some very entertaining, very funny horror novels. Funny horror novels? What? They are. They're very funny. Okay. Jerry Bingham. Jorge Zafino. I was recently looking through my Winter World, hardbound, black and white. Thank you. My favorite way to study great comic art. That's right. And realized, hey, darn it, I need more black and white Jorge. Might you be able to point me in the direction of any similar books of yours? A couple of the color graphic novels are okay, but the dark colors on cheap newsprint comics, 7-block, Terror Incorporated, just destroy his beautiful artwork. I agree. I don't know if you know this, but getting back to Conan again, I think everything gets back to Conan. Jorge and I did an issue of Savage Sword together called The Horned God. And it features a unicorn, but not any kind of unicorn you've ever met in your life. The kind of unicorn only Jorge could have pulled off. It's a scary unicorn. And I wrote it with Jorge in mind because I knew, okay, there's not a lot of artists could pull this off and make it work. Make a carnivorous, frightening unicorn work. But Jorge does it, and he brings his usual talents for everything to the story. Regular Savage Sword of Conan readers hated this story. We got a lot of mail saying, don't ever use this guy again. But it's like, Philistines. This stuff is genius. But Jerry, you're an artist, so you're bringing up Jorge for the reason that Jorge is an artist's artist. A lot of times only artists can see what it is that Jorge brings to the table. When I arrived at CrossGen, I brought my entire original art collection, and I had a lot of Jorge. And I don't think there's any artist at CrossGen, penciler or inker, who did not come to me and request I lend them those originals to make Xeroxes of. They kept those Xerox machines at CrossGen humming, copying pages of Jorge, because everybody wanted examples of that. Everybody wanted to see the originals, and they wanted copies of their own, because he's just terrific. Absolutely terrific. So check out that Savage Sword. It's 50 pages of Jorge that apparently you have never seen before. And he, like always, he brings it to the story. Excellent, cool stuff. Now, on the subject of Conan, all I can say is I'm making an announcement soon, and you need to stay tuned. By Crom. R.B. Probst. Have you considered finishing the story of the fathers and sons and the rest of the family you were serializing in yours and Gary Quapis' Civil War Adventure series? I'm not picky. I'll take a graphic novel, a miniseries, or even a prose novel. Maybe I'll just call you on the phone and tell you how it ends. I was just really enjoying their journey and would love to see where you were taking it. I would have loved to have seen that too. We had lots of plans. If you're not aware, Gary Quapis and I did 2 volumes. I think they're about 150 pages each of Civil War Adventures. They're currently still available through Dover Books. And yeah, we presented actual, they were like anthology books, but I wrote every story. Well, Gary wrote some of the stories too. And we had artwork mostly by Gary, but we had other folks as well providing artwork, notably Enrique Villagran. And we presented, actual historical events from the Civil War. But to the idea in mind to keep readers moving from one volume to the next, I wrote this sort of background story of a young boy who enlists in the Confederate Army, and early on in the war, and then we see events through his eyes, and it's him and his brother and his father and a bunch of other stuff. And it was basically to show the ground level, day to day deprivations of being a soldier in that time period, particularly in the Confederate Army, which was not as well equipped. What was camp life like? Dealing with desertion, dealing with illness, dealing with all the day-to-day events, but within an action-packed story with lots of fighting and cussing. And we were going to continue it on. We were looking at maybe there'll be 10 volumes of these, and we'll continue this story, and we'll have this one big epic story about this young guy and his experiences in Civil War seen through his eyes. But it was not to be, unfortunately, and I don't know exactly where we were going, other than we were going to continue on through the winter campaign of 1861 and the fights through the Shenandoah Valley, which formed the beginning parts of the war. But we didn't get to do it. Now, hey, I've mentioned this before. If you want the original copies of Civil War Adventure, I might still have a couple of thousand in cases in storage. So if you contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com, I can tell you how you can get these, and of course I'll sign them for you. But I'll give you a very special deal on both of these books, which are long out of print. But I'll remind you of the email address at the end here. But I think I still have a few thousand of these sitting around somewhere. Michael Boberg. It seems like the epic heavy hitters line did not last very long. I really enjoyed your Law Dog and Chaykin's Midnight Men, and I liked a lot of other titles. Can you give us more background on this? Was this intended to be a short run, or were there longer term plans that didn't pan out for the company? Well, Law Dog had a 10-issue run, and I think there was a crossover, and it was a one-shot special we never got to that had some gorgeous artwork. But yeah, this was intended as like a new sub imprint of the Epic line. There was creator-owned comics by, as you said, Howard Chaykin. There was Mike Barron, Bill Reinhold, George Perez. I mean, there were some big names involved here. And we kind of got our butts caught in the door of the shifting comic book market, right from the outset. I don't know if I've told this story before, but Flynn Henry and I created Law Dog, and I wouldn't have done Law Dog without Flynn. I mean, his wacky, crazy, idiosyncratic style really inspired me to write this like lunatic fable about subjective reality and interdimensional travel and all the rest of it. And a lot of this series was parody, thinly veiled parody of other genres, things like that. So we just went nuts on this book. And I went down to the mailbox one day, and there was the royalty check for issues 1 and 2 of Law Dog. And issue 1's check was like, whoa, this was worth doing. It was a sizable check. It was a nice check. The check for issue 2, not so much. Check for issue 2, I mean, to give you an example, issue 1's check was in the 5-figure range. Issue 2 is decidedly in the 3-figure range. So I get back up to the house. Mailbox was at the end of the driveway. And I call Flint. And I said, Flint, go check your mailbox. And Flint had a cordless phone. Goes downstairs to the lobby of his apartment building. And I can hear him the whole way. And Flint's keeping up a commentary. Because Flint can't shut up. And it's all funny. And he's telling me stuff. And he gets to the mailbox. And I said, I want to be there with you. Even if only over the phone. In case the checks for Law Dogs 1 and 2 came. And so I hear him tear the envelope open, and I hear him go, whoa, all excited, same way I was a few moments before at my mailbox. And then, what? As he looks at the second check. And he starts a stream of invectives, expletives, adult language. And when he takes a breath, I said, look, it's a good thing. And he goes, well, how is it a good thing? This one check is huge, and the other check is itty bitty. And I said, the good thing is they sent them both at once. I said, imagine getting that first check and then 30 days later getting that second check. You would have spent all that time thinking, ooh, I got a Law Dog check coming and it's going to be fat. And it isn't going to be fat. And that issue 2 check was the last one we ever saw, because Law Dog never made it into the royalty range after issue 2 again. And the reason for this was, it was, the crash in the comic market. We got caught right in the middle of it. So issue 1 sold great. Issues 2 through 10, not so much. I mean, it did okay, but never got us into the royalty range, which means it either broke even or lost money. So that's just the way it is. But the Heavy Hitters line was cool. There was some really neat titles. It was the brainchild of Carl Potts. And it was done at a time when Marvel was, raking in the cash. Marvel was the hottest thing going. And there was a lot of money. Tom DeFalco famously would say, we have enough money to take chances with things. Which was an admirable thing to do. To try, I explained in a prior video about that DeFalco went actively in search of new venues to sell comics and actively in search of new audiences, because he said, we've got the money, and so we can afford to risk some of it, because there was so much coming in on sales of books like Spider-Man and X-Men and the rest. It was Fat City for Marvel at that time, until the wheels came off for everybody. So Heavy Hitters was one of the earliest victims of the downfall of the comic book direct market. Okay, what you reading? This was popular last time. Got a lot of comments here, there, and everywhere. So what I'm reading is the same thing I was reading last time. I'm still making my way. And this is limited to comic book reading. I'm making my way through Silver Age World's Finest Omnibus Volume 2 and learning more and more about the state of things at DC Comics here as the Silver Age proceeds. Like I said last time, most of the early stories by this guy, Jerry Coleman, I had no idea who this guy was. Maybe he went on to become a famous playwright. I don't know. I hope he went on to fame and fortune somewhere else, because he was a terrible comic book writer. The more I read the stories, as a comic book writer, you can read a comic book story and see, the artist was in trouble here because the script is lacking. You can see where there was no establishment panel provided for here. There was no direct segue here. And it all had to be fixed in production when the artwork came back, because the artist just had simply no way to get the writer's ideas across, because the writer hadn't made it clear what his ideas were. So you get a lot of stories where captions tell you where they are. Like, Superman and Batman are in Metropolis, and in the next panel they're in the Batcave. But there was no transition, no discussion of this journey. And so captions have to fill in, later at the Batcave as Superman and Batman conspire to blah, blah, blah. And also the plot lines and stories are weak. Feathery motivations, just, the usual silly DC premises, but they don't really come to anything, and they're especially contrived and not good stuff. But you got some really nice Jim Mooney artwork, some really nice Dick Sprang artwork. And then we move on to Bill Finger takes over, Batman writer. And the stories, they're a little better, but they're primarily Batman stories with Superman wedged into them somehow. And of course, we were in the middle of the period on the Batman comics where he was traveling to other planets and meeting alien menaces and things like that. And so not my favorite period of Batman to begin with. And then you wed that with Superman, and it all gets kind of, not good. Not Bill Finger's best work by far, but what's he going to do? He's trapped in the premise of this book where Superman and Batman have to hang out together. Now, after Bill Finger's short run on this book comes Edmund Hamilton. And Edmund Hamilton comes to save the day. Edmund Hamilton was a science fiction writer who was a regular DC contributor for a long time during a great period in the Superman books. Famously married to Lee Brackett, who was a pulp writer as well as a screenwriter. His wife wrote Rio Bravo and co-wrote the screenplay for The Big Sleep with William Faulkner. And Brackett, for my money, wrote the very, very first urban vigilante novel ever written. Look it up. So Edmund Hamilton comes along, and he's got the same ridiculous premises, same ludicrous ideas, probably given to them by Mort Weisinger, but he knows how to work them better. He knows how to lean into the grand silliness of these stories. And the stories become more multifaceted, more fun. They become crazier. But he's obviously having fun. He brings Jimmy and Robin into the stories more. We get to the imaginary tales with the super sons and all that jazz. And just crazy premises. There's one that it's one in which Batman is having a self-esteem problems. He gets wounded by a bullet that bounces off of Superman, which is what a cool idea. He gets wounded and he's laid up for a while, and he blames himself. He says, if I was more adept, I would not have been, caught by that ricochet. And he begins to start feeling bad for himself. And so Superman has to rebuild Batman's self-esteem. And so he goes to the bottle city of Kandor and convinces them to all participate in a hoax in which there's a dastardly criminal loose in the bottled city of Kandor, and Superman has to get Batman and Robin to help him. And so Superman, and if you didn't know this, he does not have his powers in the bottled city of Kandor. So once they've shrunk them all down, including Jimmy Olsen, once they've shrunk them all down and gone into the bottled city, Superman and Batman are physical equals. And so Superman figures, well, if he can solve this phony crime, Batman, he'll feel so much better about himself. Because part of Batman's inferiority complex is, I'm not super. I'm not invulnerable or super strong. I can't fly. I mean, what use am I? Just let Superman handle it all. It's such a bizarre take on Batman. One that no one but Kevin Smith would think of. So the best part of the story, and this is pure Edmund Hamilton, is that the hoax crime being committed in the bottle city of Kandor turns out to be real. That some villainous character says, well, this is my opportunity to actually be a criminal in the bottle city. And he takes Superman's hoax ideas and makes them real. So now the city's in real danger. Well, Batman discovers the idea of the hoax, and his feelings are hurt. Like, you lied to me. What am I, a child? Well, you're acting like one, Batman. And he's angry that Superman will no longer participate. And Superman's, but no, I really do need your help now, because now it's real. The hoax isn't a hoax anymore. It's real. And the people of Kandor are in danger from these metal men, these androids who are threatening life in the city. And I need your detective skills. I honestly need you. And Batman's like, no, you lied to me. It's just more of the hoax. What do you think I am, a chump? And then eventually, of course, everything resolves itself in a not terribly contrived manner. And that was Hamilton's thing. He could take these idiotic, insane, thin premises and treat them earnestly. And so I'm really enjoying the last third of this enormous omnibus, much more than what came previous, because of Hamilton's skills. And he was a good comic book writer, because here Kurt Swan, who draws all of his stories, and they're amazing, the artwork's terrific, now has a real comic book writer providing him with scripts. And so the page turn panels and the establishment panels and segues, all the building blocks of a great comic book story are here. They're present because Hamilton was a skilled craftsman at this stuff. Silly, yes, but as I said, in a grand manner. Okay, if you want to get a hold of me with questions, comments, pictures of your dogs, Anything, artwork you've done, whatever, get a hold of me at brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. If you want those Civil War books, let me know. The offer with St. Jude's for the Denny O'Neil Bat Bible are still up. If you want the Bat Bible, let me know through Bruno Bookstore. And a little bit more here. I've been on a lot of these pitching the Patreon account, the Arkhaven Patreon account. Some of you have let me know you're not very happy with the different subscription levels and problems with fulfillment. Well, I don't handle fulfillment on them. So what I want to do is I'm started an account at Subscribestar, and I will have the link in comments below this video. The Subscribestar is a different service. There's only one tier. It's $5. I'm going to do the fulfillment myself. I'm going to handle that myself. And if you subscribe for $5 on the Subscribestar site, there'll be a ride ticket that only subscribers can see. Cut and paste it, email it to me. The instructions are there, and you will immediately have a goodie bag sent off to you. Every goodie bag is not the same, but they're all full of stuff worth quite a bit more than $5. And you start your subscription, and then not only do you get the goodie bag, but you get permanently on the subscription list for any future things that come up, either physical media or digital. And I promise I will be sending stuff to you that's really cool on a regular basis. So you want to look for the ride ticket there on the site. Send that to me, and then you're part of the club. You get into the clubhouse. Even girls are allowed. So yeah, and it's this one tier. It's egalitarian. We're all the same. It's just $5 a month, and that helps me with the comic projects I'm doing. But mostly it's to help me with these videos. I would like to make these videos weekly, but I have to have enough subscribers to make it worth taking the day out of my schedule from writing to do them. And if I got 100 subscribers, it would be worth doing these videos every week to take time away from the writing to do them. And that's just it, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Happy campers. It's naked capitalism, so there you go. If you go to Subscribestar and follow the link below this, and help me out, and because YouTube certainly ain't, I will continue to do these because I do love doing them. I love talking to you, and I appreciate all the questions and everything else. And once again, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. And I'll see everybody, every single one of you, down the road.